Welcome to Leaders with Lessons. I'm your host, Shaun Walsh, and on this podcast, I talk with senior leaders, founders, and decision makers to explore the realities of leading change, transformation, AI adoption, and personal growth. As always, the show is sponsored by the Get It Done framework. It's for leaders who've got no shortage of options, especially around tech and business change, that need to get clear on where they actually are before deciding what to do next, and sometimes what to leave well alone. It gets it out of your head and into a format you can work with. A short, sharp session with a senior pair of eyes backed by experience. You'll come away with the recommended way forward, the real risks named, and the clear next move. If that sounds like something that would give you some clarity right now, check out the link in the show notes. But on today's show, our guest is Rish Tandapany. Rish, welcome to the conversation. Tell us a little bit about you and the work that you do.
Thanks, Shaun. Thanks for having me as well. Really appreciate it. A bit about me. I'm a financial services and fintech executive with experience across retail investing, wealth, retirement products, crypto trading, you name it. Most recently, I was Group Chief Operating Officer at Easy Equities, which was South Africa's largest retail wealth platform, where I pretty much helped to lead the operational, regulatory products and customer foundations of what can only be described as a kind of fast-growing investment business. Before that, I founded Trynkle, which is a professional services consultancy, which really supported organizations through strategy, transformation, and operational change in a kind of pre-AI world, which I later sold just before joining Easy Equities. I also worked with a variety of institutions where, from graduation to that point, Deutsche Bank, ADSSS, very internationally focused, worked across 6 different markets, lived in 6 different locations, and a variety of complex environments. My real focus throughout my career has always been making financial services and fintech and operational change accessible to enough people in enough geographies. And as long as I can do that, I'll be happy. I'm in the process of relocating to London and looking forward to that next chapter in the global fintech ecosystem.
Fantastic. What a vast range of experience you've got from the international travel to coming back to London. Yeah, and then all the bits in between. If you could look back and imagine when you first started on this journey, carrying back the knowledge that you've got now from all that stuff that you've done and from the cultural changes from moving internationally as well, would you do anything differently?
Yeah, I think the only thing I'd do differently is absorb more. I think when you're young and you've got a bit of ego attached to you, and you think you're making the right decisions, and you're obviously in the bigger meetings. It's hard not to listen, and at times I do wish I'd listened more. I think the other thing that really kind of came to me kind of through my mid late 20s, the realization that change it's not an occasional challenge, right? It's constant. It's that kind of normal operating environment. And I think when I got to grasp with that, I did better in my career. And that only came through listening to others kind of clearly and concisely. And more importantly, the reality is that you're never the smartest person in any given room. Specifically when talking about kind of technology stacks and automation and how operational methodologies and things like that are evolving. So just taking in everyone else's viewpoints, kind of building my own kind of cadence and my own intelligence with regards to the models and frameworks I was working on would be something I would do a bit differently. And I think the only other thing I would do slightly differently was maybe put more emphasis on learning the technology earlier in my career. For me, I'm 42 years old. It was very much about knowing accounting and operational processes, maybe a bit of Python, SQL, all those type of things. But then when you look at the wave of technology we have now, it's a chasm, right? So maybe there would have been a bit of interest, or I should have shown a bit of interest in kind of pursuing the technology side of things earlier. But you don't know what you don't know at that stage. So
yeah, that makes sense. So kind of the thread running through that. Be open, listen, absorb it as you're going on through those career transitions, and then lean into the technology and the change.
Yeah. I think the involving part is very much a personality kind of KPI, if you like.
Okay.
I think we come from a world where it was do, and not really sit back and kind of assess things and add your personality to a particular process or a particular project. Now, if you
Yeah.
think about it now, any LLM can pretty much do the process, the framework for you in 30, 40 seconds. So what is the value, excuse me, what is the value proposition that you bring to that particular automation or that particular project or that particular framework change? And so I think that's important. I think the ability to kind of frame things with a slight tinge of your own experience, with a slight tinge of your own failures more than successes, as well, is important.
Yeah.
Those language models, those prompts that you're working from really are dependent on the success criteria that you have or haven't met in the past, right?
Mm.
And sometimes those are very, very methodical operational things, like a process took X amount of time, as an example. And then sometimes they're very, very personality, EQ driven ideals where, team members don't adhere to processes or team members feel differently about this type of thing. And
Yeah.
I think specifically in the last couple of years, as I've done more kind of AI transition projects, I think one thing that's come to me is really working with people who do or don't know how to transition into that AI environment. And the only way
Yeah.
you're going to learn that is really from listening to them. You can't really tell them, an AI told you to do this or an LLM told you to do this. You really have to listen to them. So I think that absorption point I mentioned earlier is very much linked to the EQ side of running a team or an organization.
Yeah. Yeah. So that human element, the emotional intelligence,
100%.
the connection. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, you mentioned your age there. We're of a similar age, and I've reflected on, I suppose, as I've hit a point in my career, not done yet, not starting, so somewhere in the middle, but somewhere in the middle with rapid change driven by technology, whether we talk about AI or even glance a little bit further into the future, but not too far now, for some quantum computing. And then
Mm.
what do we take from the past with that, the experience, which I think is, of a similar reflection there, that human element, and how we're holding that and teaching the next generation to work with that and retain some of their critical thinking and skills without just accepting a process verbatim or an answer verbatim. It's an interesting challenge, more so because the speed of it seems to be getting quicker and quicker.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the massive kind of changes in leadership style and leadership mechanism that really needs to be adopted over the next 2 to 3 years isn't so much what it was 10, 15 years ago, which was telling people what to do and ensuring they do it.
Yeah,
It's more a kind of guiding feature to management and leadership.
yeah,
Interestingly enough, in the last couple of organizations that I've worked with or for, we don't use the word exec, we use the word coach. And
yeah,
there's a slight nuance in that. I think from an exec standpoint, you're really looking at, building out KPIs and OKRs and ensuring that your team pretty hard and fast rules as to how they apply themselves and get those KPIs and OKRs done. But from a coaching perspective, you're really coming from a baseline, which is, I assume, and I think I know how my team is going to achieve those OKRs and KPIs. How do I just keep them on the train tracks, right? How do I keep them steady? How do I ensure they're not moving too fast, too slow? How do
yeah,
I really ensure also that they're invested in the processes and the job that they're actually doing and not having some of these more modern problems like, mental health problems at work or, diversity of project, things like that, where, people just get involved in too many things and don't necessarily keep the focus that they need to. So I think that idea of being a coach and really cultivating the relationship between a manager or a leader and
yeah,
his or her staff is significantly important, especially because that's something that AI can't really tell you what to do. What AI can probably tell you to do is say, well, look, these are the frameworks that they've used in the past, and let's try to apply them to your team. But it doesn't know your team well enough on an individual level, or specifically on an organizational culture level, to say, hey, look, there are certain nuances and small snippets of information that you really can't process, and you need to, visibly see that transparently. So I
yeah.
think that is something that people of our generation definitely can take forward.
Yeah, that's interesting. And you touched on EQ as well, and I'm wondering that human element. even talking in a format like this, which is digital, we're still leveraging the technology, but being able to look at somebody and pick up on the subtleties of body language, which I think is magnified when you actually are sharing the in-person space as well. So perhaps using the technology tools for their strengths, retaining that critical thinking within it. But what I'm hearing from you is don't discount that human element. And I really like the reframing of executive to coach and accounting for the person within the work rather than just measuring the work and the output.
Yeah, I think, not trying to make it sound like the generation where everything has fallen on our shoulders, but if you look at AI and you look at Trump and you look at COVID and these kind of social issues that we're having now, it does
Yeah.
feel to a certain extent that everything has been funneled into this kind of 4, 5, 6 year period, and that's intense. If you think about remote work as a concept, I mean, yeah, it existed in the last 20, 30 years, but very much in its infancy. And then all of a sudden in 2020, it gets propagated into the whole kind of worldly conversation. And so then you think about that with AI, etc. And then you really think about yourself, what are the factors here that really are not going to be stable with all these pieces moving? And people is the factor that isn't going to be stable, right? And
Yeah.
people for me is directly linked to that idea of emotional intelligence. And it's not about being soft or avoiding difficult conversations. It's really about understanding what is happening beneath the surface. What are people worried about? An LLM probably can't tell you that. It could probably tell you where your strategy is failing, but it probably couldn't tell you, unless everyone's open, about what people are worried about and what is unclear. I think that's another major piece that I've seen specifically in the last 6 to 9 months, where we have output-driven strategies or AI output-driven strategies, which still need to be communicated and translated at a human level to 200, 5,000, 10,000 members of staff. And then you would start to ask yourself, well, okay, what's preventing them from doing their best work? So the EQ, staff leadership, coaching side of things is really, really important. And I think the other thing that's kind of something that I really can't, I spend a lot of time thinking about it and don't have a definitive answer is, are we really pro AI or not? So AI has been marketed, unfortunately, in a way that it is so fast. Cadence is just out of this world, and it's so automated and thorough and detailed that we don't need human beings to a certain extent. And so that and I have no doubt that will be the end result over a period of time, but that doesn't necessarily help create stability at this juncture. So I think the role of a coach or a leader in 2026 is really helping the staff navigate that. And not just staff, family members, kids, we talked about it offline, marriages, dating advice. They're all powerful. The AI is such a powerful agent in all of those threads, but it needs to be balanced with certain amounts of EQ. And I value directness in terms of empathy as well. So, we care about expectations, performance, things like that. So yeah, it's tricky. It sounds complicated, but I'm sure we'll get there.
Well, yeah, whether we'll get there or not, the pace is increasing. I think that's for sure. And nothing exists within isolation. We've spoken about work, family, and everything within and around that. What comes to mind is, how do you regulate yourself so you can connect and help others regulate? And interestingly, on the other side of EQ is that awareness there. So if you're dealing with somebody within rapid change, either at work or at home or both, and in society in general, chances are I'm coming across more people with dysregulated, spiked nervous systems, which is reducing the capacity to think and act, which impacts the work, impacts the home life. And we seek balance, but that's a shifting pivot point, almost changing day by the hour. So the awareness, I think awareness seems to be key. And I also feel that as a double-edged sword, because it's raw. Sometimes I suspect for myself it would be easier not to be aware, but then I think you're just kicking the can down the road and you're going to pay that price later. So yeah, awareness, what do we do with it? How do you regulate yourself, and how do you help your broader community in work and external?
No, 100%. And look, I touched on the last point, but I think the increase of remote work or hybrid working models where you are spending less time in the pub or at water coolers or, you know, going for grabbing a sandwich with your team. That face-to-face interaction where you can really tell how a person is feeling. You know, teams can do a lot, Zoom can do a lot, but really that personal interface is kind of magic. And that leads to your point of awareness, whereby people naturally gesture more and give more information when you're in person, right? There's only so many football matches you can watch on the TV before you realize that watching it in person is a completely different vibe and feeling. And to use that example in the workplace and even in your personal life, you know, I've seen over COVID, I had personal experience of this in my marriage, where I spent a huge part of COVID away from my family. And I can tell you right now, that wasn't just difficult, it made me a much more difficult person to read and understand and really kind of empathize with. So I think the awareness is key. I also think, you know, the reason podcasts like this are important, and you know, the government obviously needs to get involved at some stage in terms of education, etc., is just giving the people, like you said, a kind of normal view and vibe of how leaders and run of the mill working people think about these type of problems. I do think there's an element of, we're being told how to think about AI, we're being told how to think about remote work. If we don't get on that bandwagon, you know, the end is nigh for you. But the reality is, it's much more intricate than that, right? It's much more complex. It's very personalized in some cases. So I think the nature of this type of education, where you've got leaders, you've got other people just interacting on an impersonal level, sharing their feelings, is very different from your organizational, cultural rhetoric, you know, that you get on a day-to-day basis. So I would advise all people who've shared good and bad experiences in the last few years to kind of share it.
Yeah, appreciate that. All for the knowledge and the awareness, and then what do we do with it? Yeah, well, we're about at time, Rish. Thank you very much. That's been really enlightening. What is the best way for people to connect with you?
Yeah, thanks, Shaun. I think the best way is LinkedIn. I'm active on LinkedIn. I post a lot on very similar topics to the ones we've discussed today. So sometimes it sounds like rebel, and I'm having a bad moment, but I think it's better to share it with the masses. And more often than not, I get a lot of comments of people empathizing with me. So please, anyone hears this and wants to reach out, it's Rish Tandapany on LinkedIn. Pretty easy to find me. And yeah, I would love to talk to you again.
Yeah, appreciate it. Well, I've really enjoyed the time chatting to you. I'm sure everybody listening has as well. I'd recommend everybody checks out Rish on LinkedIn. And thank you so much for being on the show. Appreciate it. And as a reminder to everybody listening, the show's sponsored by the Get It Done framework. So if you've got no shortage of options and want to get something actually delivered, especially around tech and business change, that needs some help to understand where you actually are before taking your next step, the Get It Done framework can help you. It gets the problems out of your head and into a format you can work with. But until next time, remember, the obstacle becomes the way.